The apartment. I have to get this out, and I don't care if no one believes me. Maybe someone else has seen this guy or experienced something like it. All I know is I can't keep it to myself anymore. That it all started about 3 months ago. I had just moved into a new apartment after a breakup. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom in a quiet part of town. The rent was cheap, and I liked that it was close to my work. The building was old, but it had a certain charm. Or so I thought at the time that I started noticing him about a week after I moved in. At first, it was just small things. I'd see a man standing on the street when I left for work in the morning. He always wore the same thing, a long black coat, even though it was the middle of summer, and a hat that covered most of his face. He never moved, he just stood there, looking down the street like he was waiting for someone. I thought it was weird, but I figured maybe he was just a local or someone waiting for a ride. But then, I started seeing him everywhere. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. I'd see him standing across the street from my building when I came home from work, or catch a glimpse of him in the distance while running errands. It was always the same, he never seemed to do anything. Just stood there, in the same black coat and hat, his face always hidden in shadows. No matter how fast I walked or how many times I turned to look back, he was always there, in the corner of my eye. That I told myself I was being paranoid. That was all in my head. I even talked to my friends about it, but they just laughed it off, telling me it was probably just some guy who lived in the neighborhood. I wanted to believe them. I really did. Then things got worse. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my window. My apartment is on the second floor, so no one should be walking outside my window at that hour. But I heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was pacing back and forth. That I didn't want to look. I don't know why, but something inside me told me not to. But I couldn't help myself. I peeked through the blinds, and there he was, standing in the alley, looking up at my window. His face was still hidden, but I could feel him watching me. I felt cold, like the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in an instant. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't move. I just stared at him, frozen, until he slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. After that, things started happening in my apartment. Lights would flicker on and off, even though the bulbs were new. I'd hear whispers at night, just on the edge of hearing, like someone was talking right outside my door. My phone would ring, and when I answered, no one would be there, just static on the other end. I started locking all the windows and doors, but it didn't make me feel any safer. One night, I woke up to the sound of breathing, loud, heavy breathing, like someone was standing right next to my bed. I bolted upright, but no one was there. The room was empty. I tried to tell myself it was a dream, but I knew it wasn't. That I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake at night, listening for any sign of him, any sign that he was outside. I stopped going out after dark and kept the curtains drawn at all times. My friends were worried, but I couldn't explain it to them without sounding insane. Who would believe me? Then, last week, something happened that I still can't explain. That I was sitting in my living room, trying to relax and watch TV, when the temperature in the room suddenly dropped again. I could see my breath in the air, and all the lights flickered. And then, I heard it, a knock at the door. That I didn't want to answer it. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me not to, but I had to know. I had to see if it was him. I slowly walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When I opened it, no one was there, but something was wrong. I could feel it. The air felt thick, like something was pressing down on me. I tried to close the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was like someone, or something, was holding it open. And then I saw him. Standing at the end of the hallway, just staring at me. This time, I could see his face. Pale, almost translucent, with hollow, empty eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. He didn't move, didn't say anything. Just stood there, watching. That I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. I backed away, but I could feel him. He was still there, on the other side. Watching. waiting that I haven't seen him since that night, but I know he's still out there. I feel him watching me, even now, as I'm writing this. The lights in my apartment keep flickering, and the air feels colder than it should be that I don't know what he wants. I don't understand why he's following me. All I know is that I can't get rid of him. If anyone else has seen him, if anyone else knows what's happening to me, please, tell me what to do. I don't think I can take this much longer. The building. I've been debating whether to write this for weeks. The more I think about it, the more unsettled I feel. I'm not sure how to explain what's been happening without sounding like I've completely lost it, but I need to get it out. Maybe someone out there has gone through something similar and can help. That IT started about 2 months ago, right after I moved into a new apartment. It's a small, older building in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was close to work, and the rent was cheap, so I jumped at the chance. The first couple of weeks were normal. I settled in, unpacked my stuff, and got used to the creaky floors and thin walls. You know, typical apartment life. Then I met him, the stranger. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was coming back from the grocery store, juggling a couple of bags and trying to fish my keys out of my pocket. That's when I noticed him for the first time. He was standing across the street, just staring at me. At first glance, there wasn't anything particularly weird about him. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face and jeans that looked a little too big for him. I couldn't see much of his face, but I figured he was just some random guy from the neighborhood. Still, something about him made me uneasy. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there, watching me as I struggled with my keys. I gave him a quick nod, like the kind you give someone when you accidentally make eye contact with a stranger, but he didn't respond. I hurried inside, chalking it up to my own paranoia. It was a big city, after all. You see weird stuff sometimes. That I didn't think much of it, until the next day that I was heading out for a run in the late afternoon when I saw him again. This time, he was standing at the far end of the street, half hidden behind a telephone pole, watching me. Same black hoodie, same eerie stillness. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was staring directly at me. Again, I tried to ignore it. I put in my earbuds, cranked up the music, and ran in the opposite direction, but after that, I started seeing him more often. Every day, it was the same thing. I'd leave the apartment for work, and there he'd be, standing at the edge of the block, just watching. Sometimes, he was across the street, sometimes, he was closer. But he was always there. And it wasn't like he was following me. He never moved. I'd walk down the street, look back, and he'd still be standing in the exact same spot, unmoving. That IT started to get under my skin. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he lived in a neighborhood, maybe he was just a guy with a lot of free time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was something off about him. Something I couldn't explain. Things escalated after the first month. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a strange tapping sound. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like someone was tapping their fingers on the window. My apartment is on the second floor, so no one should have been outside. I tried to convince myself it was just a tree branch or maybe a bird, but when I rolled over to look at the window, my stomach dropped. That he was there. Standing in the alley behind the building, staring up at my window. His face was still hidden under that black hood, but I knew it was him. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. Just stood there, in the middle of the night, watching me. That I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I didn't know what to do. I just lay there, staring at him, too scared to move. After what felt like an eternity, he finally turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. That was when I started to get really scared. It was one thing to see him during the day, in public places. But in the middle of the night, outside my window, that was something else entirely. The next morning, I called the building manager to see if they had any cameras outside. They didn't. Of course. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to tell them? That some guy in a hoodie was standing outside my window in the middle of the night. They'd think I was crazy. Or worse, they'd show up, not find anything, and I'd be stuck looking paranoid that I started keeping my blinds shut and avoided going out after dark. But even during the day, he was always there. Always watching. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of him standing at the end of the block. Other times, he'd be across the street, half hidden behind a parked car. I never saw him move. I never saw him leave. But no matter where I went, he was always there. Then the dream started. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the distinct feeling that I wasn't alone. I'd hear faint footsteps or soft whispers, but when I turned on the lights, the apartment was empty. At least, I thought it was. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, but the dreams felt so real that in one dream, I was walking down a long, dark hallway. The walls were lined with old, rotting wallpaper, and the air was thick with the smell of dampness and decay. I knew I shouldn't be there, but I couldn't stop walking. And at the end of the hallway, standing in the shadows, was the stranger. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as I slowly walked closer and closer. I tried to stop, but my legs wouldn't obey. I woke up just as I reached him, my heart racing. That dream repeated almost every night, each time getting a little more vivid, a little more terrifying. It got to the point where I was afraid to go to sleep. The more I tried to avoid it, the more real it became. I started hearing his voice, low, guttural whispers that I couldn't quite make out. But I knew they were meant for me. Then one night, I woke up and found him standing in my bedroom. I don't know how he got in, but he was there, standing in the corner, his hood pulled low over his face. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at him, paralyzed with fear. For what felt like hours, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he lifted his head, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face. It was pale, deathly pale, almost translucent, like the skin of a corpse. His eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his skull, and his lips were twisted into a thin, crooked smile. He didn't speak, but I could feel the malice radiating from him, like a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. I must have blacked out, because when I woke up, it was morning, and he was gone. But I could still feel his presence. Like he was watching me, even when I couldn't see him. I've tried to leave the apartment, tried staying with friends, but no matter where I go, he follows. I see him in the distance, standing at the edge of my vision, always watching. I don't know what he wants, but I can feel him getting closer. I can't escape him. I don't know how much longer I can take this. If anyone out there has seen him, if you know what he is or how to stop him, please, help me. Because I'm running out of time. The drive. I don't know how to explain this, but something's been following me, and I don't know how to make it stop. It all started a few weeks ago when I took a trip to visit my parents. They live in a small town, the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. I hadn't been back in a while, and the long drive through empty highways was peaceful, at least at first. But on the way back, I started seeing this guy on the side of the road. He was just standing there. In the middle of nowhere. No car, no bike, nothing. Just standing. He had on a gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, and his face was turned down, so I couldn't see it clearly. I passed him, and it was weird, but I didn't think much of it at the time. People hitchhike, right? Maybe he was waiting for a ride, but then, about 10 miles down the road, I saw him again. Same hoodie, same position, standing by the side of the road. I drove past him, heart racing, trying to convince myself that I must have just imagined it. But the farther I drove, the more I kept seeing him. Always standing in the exact same way, always in that same hoodie, always watching as I drove by. I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was a different guy, or maybe I was tired and just seeing things. But it wasn't. It was him. Every time. By the time I got home, I was a wreck. I locked all the doors and windows and tried to forget about it. But the next morning, I saw him again. He was standing across the street from my apartment. this time, there was no mistaking it. He was watching me. Over the next few days, I kept seeing him. No matter where I went, grocery store, work, even just going out for a walk, he was always there, standing in the distance. He never moved, never got closer. Just stood there, watching. That I tried ignoring him, but that only seemed to make things worse. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud banging sound, like someone was knocking on my front door. I shot out of bed, heart pounding, and crept to the door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there, but I could feel him. The air was heavy, like something was pressing down on me. I couldn't explain it, but I knew he was outside. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every little noise made me jump, and every shadow felt like it was creeping toward me. The next day, I told my friend about what was happening, hoping she'd tell me I was being paranoid. Instead, she got quiet, real serious, and told me about this story her grandmother used to tell her. She said some people, very unlucky people, see a watcher. He doesn't talk, doesn't move, but once you notice him, he doesn't leave. No matter where you go, he'll always be there, just standing, waiting for something. She didn't know what he wanted or how to get rid of him. All she said was that once you've seen him, it's too late. That I don't want to believe her. I want to believe this is all in my head. But the banging on my door has been happening more and more, always at night. Sometimes it sounds like he's knocking on the windows, or even tapping on the walls. But when I look, no one's there. It's like he's toying with me, letting me know that he's always close. That I've tried everything to make it stop. I've saged the apartment, put salt along the windowsills, and even had a priest come bless the place. Nothing's worked. I've been thinking about moving, but something tells me it won't make a difference. He'll follow me wherever I go. Last night was the worst. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of someone breathing, heavy, ragged breathing, like they were right next to me. My room was pitch black, but I could feel someone there, standing at the foot of my bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I just lay there, frozen, listening to that awful breathing until it stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to turn on the light, the room was empty. But the closet door, which I always keep closed, was wide open. That I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared to sleep, scared to leave my apartment, scared to even look out the window. Because every time I do, he's there, watching. Just standing there in that damn hoodie, waiting. That I know I sound crazy, but if you've ever seen him, or if you know anything about how to make him go away, please, help me. I can't take this much longer.